Greetings, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. In January 2022, the Caribbean Court of Justice was accepted into the International Consortium for Court Excellence, or ICCE. We discussed the ramifications of that move and more with the Honorable Mr. Justice Adrian Saunders, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Welcome, Justice Saunders, and even before we begin, how do you feel to be at the helm of the CCJ at this point in time?
Excited, honored, very pleased, and thrilled, really. Thank you for having me on the show. We really appreciate it. And I'm quite glad to be able to share with your viewers about the Caribbean Court of Justice.
And we are also very pleased to have you. And with that, we want to start with a small overview, please, of the Caribbean Court of Justice and your role as president.
Sure. Well, the Caribbean Court of Justice was launched in 2005, but it actually is an idea that has been in the making for several decades before that. The notion is that there should be in the region a court of final appeal for civil, constitutional, criminal matters instead of the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, which these countries have been using as a legacy of the colonial construct. In the early part of the century, the late part of the last century, it was also recognized that it was necessary to revise the Treaty of Chaguaramas. That's, of course, the economic treaty, the Treaty of Economic Integration among CARICOM states. And it was considered that as a fundamental part of that revised treaty, there should be a court that would interpret and apply the treaty. And so it was convenient to have this single court, both to apply and to interpret the revised treaty, as well as to offer CARICOM states the opportunity to delink from the Privy Council and to send their final appeals to this new court, the Caribbean Court of Justice. And it was in that regard that the court was established. I have to tell you that the court was established in a way that is the envy of many courts throughout the world, because in the first place, the financial considerations that underpin the operations of the court are novel, are ensured, are guaranteed to ensure that the court is not dependent on the states that subscribe to it for its annual budget. That's a long story. If we have time, I can get into the details of that. But it was also established in a manner to ensure that the court was free from any kind of political influence or inappropriate influences of any kind. So we've been operating since 2005. We are headquartered in Port of Spain, but it is possible for us, and we have sat from time to time in other countries throughout the region, but the judges reside here, and the headquarters of the court are located here in Port of Spain.
And I hope,
in a nutshell, that I think is it.
Thank you so much. And I hope to be able to get back to those financial underpinnings that allow justice
Sure.
to be a little more blind. But before that, though, what exactly is the International Consortium for Court Excellence, or ICCE?
Right. Courts are very unique institutions, and a number of the very well-recognized courts throughout the world, the Australasian courts, the Singapore courts, the courts of the United States, the federal judicial courts, the National Center for State Courts, they all on their own had been developing frameworks for benchmarking and measuring court excellence. And then in 2007, they decided to come together to pool their researches, their experience, and to develop an international framework of court excellence. So these initial bodies, these initial courts and tribunals started this consortium. It's a group of courts that embrace the framework, that commit to applying it, that apply it with success, and that popularize it. And they made that grouping open to other courts that have adopted a similar approach, namely that have embraced the framework, and we'll talk about the framework a little bit, that have been applying the framework and that have demonstrated success in their application of the framework. And so courts throughout the world are eligible to apply to the consortium for membership status. And we, because from our very inception in 2005, we strove for excellence. In last year, we determined that we should apply for membership, and we did. One had to submit a range of documentation. One had to establish that you were a court that embraced the framework, that was applying the framework with success, and that the metrics by which you can be measured permitted you to be ranked among those courts that should be admitted into membership. And so earlier this year, we got the very good news that yes, we were admitted as a member of the consortium.
And we have about 2 more minutes on this side of the conversation, Justice Saunders. You've said frameworks, you've mentioned the word framework many times. So with that in mind, and in these 2 minutes we have, what is the difference between ICCE and IFCE?
Right, the ICCE is the club, consortium, the group of persons who embrace and apply the framework. The framework, it's a set of values, a set of metrics, a set of tools that courts can use to measure their performance. It is broken down into 7 areas of court excellence. These would relate to court management and leadership, court policies, court resources, court proceedings, user satisfaction, affordable and accessible court services, public trust and confidence. And each of these 7 areas is broken down further. And so the framework allows you to measure yourself, to assess yourself in each of these areas, and to, the tools that they provide allow you to get a score for each of the areas when you assess yourself. And with that score, you devise a plan to improve on those areas where you fell short. You implement that plan, you evaluate that plan, you evaluate your implementation, and then you self-assess and measure again. So it's a continuing cycle of self-assessment.
And we want to look at that plan, Justice, when we return in terms of that plan for improvement, as well as the significance of actually being accepted to the ICCE. We do that. We continue this conversation with a president of the CCJ, Justice Adrian Saunders. When we return, stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with Justice Adrian Saunders, President of the CCJ. And Justice Saunders, what is the importance of being admitted to the ICCE? So yes, you say it's a good thing, you're happy, you're elated, but translate that for me. What does that mean?
Sure. First of all, it's a recognition of the strategies and plans that we have put in place and have been following over the years. Secondly, it tells us that we're on the right track, that we can truly regard ourselves as a court of excellence. You know, in our strategic plan, our vision is to be a model of judicial excellence. So being recognized as a member of the consortium now tells us that that's not an empty boast. We are truly a vision. Our vision can truly be said to be a model of judicial excellence. But more than that, we are the first court in the region to have been accepted into the consortium. And we take very seriously our role as the premier court, the highest court of the region, because for us, being in that position means that we should be an exemplar. We should be a model to other courts. And I think that being admitted into membership is a validation of our striving to be that kind of model. So the other courts in the region can now, with a certain amount of confidence, with a greater level of confidence, regard the CCJ as truly a court whose example they can follow.
And on that note, I'm very glad that that's how you ended that answer, because I'm looking at external validation in terms of like acceptance to the ICCE versus a validation that is a little closer to home. What are some of those factors that you think will be needed to help grease the wheels so that the CCJ becomes the final appellate court for more jurisdictions throughout the region? And I take that in the context that you said even before 2005, it was decades in the making. But what are some of those things that you're looking for, hoping to see?
Well, there are several things which I think that the public can measure us on. You know, the manner in which we provide services to our stakeholders. One small example: COVID caught a lot of the pandemic caught a lot of courts flat-footed. We were not in the least affected by COVID because even before the pandemic, a lot of our cases were dealt with virtually because we have to cater for a customer base from Belize in Central America right down to Suriname on the South American mainland. And so we had developed our IT platform to a level where long before everybody was into Zoom and Microsoft Teams, we were hearing cases by those measures, by video conferencing measures. So what the court has been able to achieve and what the court continues to strive to achieve is a measure of efficiency and effectiveness that will convince governments and the general public that this is a court which you can trust. This is a court that is a worthy replacement of the Privy Council. Because as you know, of the 11 or so states that are eligible to accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the court, only 4 currently do so: Barbados, Guyana, Belize, and the Commonwealth of Dominica. And it's a long story as to how and why other states have not yet acceded. For my own part, sending appeals to the Privy Council is not sustainable. I don't think that countries could continue to do this indefinitely. And therefore, the CCJ simply has to demonstrate that it is a proper alternative. It is a worthy alternative. It provides justice in no less effective a manner than the Privy Council. And I think it is only a matter of time before other states accede to our appellate jurisdiction as well.
We look at this with bated breath to see when that day will come. But we have about 4 minutes more. I want to spend about 2 minutes each trying to get a little more explanation from you in terms of the financial underpinnings of the CCJ that allow it to be a little more independent, as well as the CCJ plans to continue perfecting, improving, and striving towards excellence. Thank you, Justice.
That's correct. Okay. Our budget does not come from annual subventions from any particular source, from any government. What happened when the court was being formed, and this is an extremely novel arrangement, the heads of government of the Caribbean community asked themselves, well, what sum of money would it take if you invest that sum would yield an interest that can keep the court running over an indefinite period of time. And they thought that 100 million US dollars would do the trick. So they asked the Caribbean Development Bank to source $100 million. That money was on lent to the various states in proportion to their GDP. So that Trinidad and Tobago would have repaid 26% or so of that, 26 million. Similarly, Jamaica, my own country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, would have paid $2.1 million. And so the money was spread around the various states, and all of these states repaid the CDB, the $100 million. That money has long been repaid because it was a 10-year loan that was taken out in 2004. The $100 million was given to a group of trustees. These trustees comprise persons from the banking and insurance sector, the business sector. You have a head of a chief justice on it. You have a representative from the bar associations. And the remit of the trustees is to invest these monies so that it yields a sufficient sum for us to live off that interest. And that is how our budget, that is the source of our expenses. It means that we do not have to interface with governments each year. And it means that there's a certain measure of independence in the running of the court. It's a novel arrangement. It's the envy of international courts the world over. When you tell them and you explain to them how that has been done, they marvel. They wish that they had something like that in place as well. And it's a testament to the genius of Caribbean people when we really put our minds to resolving an issue. And you know, it's something which is there. The other issue that you spoke about was what again?
You have about 30 seconds looking at plans for the CCJ to improve
plans
itself.
For the future. Well, we want to continue to be a court of excellence. In the short time that we have been operating, the court has become the nerve center of a regional judicial ecosystem where we bring judges and magistrates together from throughout the region, where we assist in doing training, embarking on training exercises for courts throughout the region, so that irrespective of whether a state has acceded to the appellate jurisdiction or not, we interface with the courts throughout the region in one way or another. And that is one of the proudest aspects of the court for me. The fact that we don't just say that we are a model. We don't just say that we want to model excellence, but we actually ensure that we have a relationship with other courts in the region that allows us to share our experiences with them and to learn from their experiences, and that allows for judicial education to be more highly developed, that allows for external agencies like Canada, for example, that wanted to invest $20 million in the improvement of justice services. They gave that money to the CCJ to manage on behalf of the heads of judiciary of the region.
And I'm
so
sure that once
that
again, this would be the model and envy of many people, and hopefully this is just a precedent and a start to further conversations. But we want to thank you very much, Justice Adrian Saunders, the President of the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, looking at the International Consortium for Court Excellence. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth. Thank you for joining us.